What's going on, everybody? Welcome to GLE. Got a special episode today. I'm sitting here with a friend of mine from Porter Hedges. We actually met at a networking event here in Houston not too long ago and have bonded and had a couple lunches, and he's become an individual that I greatly respect, and my wife and I have had the opportunity to hang out with a couple times. So I wanted to have him on GLE and share a little bit about what he's doing with you all. Joe, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, man. So we met at a networking event. You're working with Porter Hedges now. Give our audience a little background on you and your story that has kind of led you down the law path to Porter Hedges where you are today.
Yeah, no. So, I'm a partner now at Porter Hedges. So I'm practice law there. And I work mainly in mergers and acquisitions. So I help people buy and sell companies. I also help people invest in companies and really get them started. I really didn't see myself going to law school early on. I think my dad was a lawyer for a period in time, and I kind of was thinking, I don't want to just follow, what he did and everything. And so when I went to college, I wasn't thinking of that. I studied economics. And one of the classes I took later on was a class called American Economic History. And that was basically a comparison of the Constitution to the Articles of Confederation, which were in place before the Constitution, and then comparing those to the Constitution of the Confederate States. So, during the Civil War, when they split off, the South wrote its own Constitution. And kind of looking at it from a very macroeconomic standpoint, but, reading the law, the language in the law and what impact that can have. And that kind of inspired me to, I really enjoyed reading that and thinking through how what people write can impact, how they're going to act or how they're going to conduct themselves. And so from there, I, applied to law school, went to law school, and just kind of, now I am where I am.
Cool, man. So getting into mergers and acquisitions, how'd you go down that route?
So in law school, during the summers, I interned with a couple of law firms, and I was kind of 50-50 on the fence. So, when you're in law school, there's always this, do you want to do litigation or do you want to do kind of transactional work, which is going to like mergers and acquisition or securities regulation? And I was kind of open to both. I was leaning a little bit towards the mergers and acquisitions work because it's kind of business related. It's like what I studied. And, but I wasn't going to write off litigation because you just don't know until you do it. And so I went all the way through and I still stayed kind of 50-50. And going into my last year of law school, I had the opportunity to clerk for a judge on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal judge. And it was, and she's based here in Houston, and it was really a great experience. I worked with 3 other guys, and we're all very, very close friends today. We all worked for this judge who was very, very smart, and it's very much when you do that, it's a 1-year thing, and it's kind of like an apprenticeship. So it's a great transition to going from I'm a college student wearing like sweatpants and stuff to I've got to show up at a job every day and do something. But it was a great transition for that. And it's a great transition too for practicing law, because you're going from being a law student and you've got this intermediate where you're working with someone who's very, very smart, very well respected. And, but you're working really closely with them in very much a mentor capacity before you just kind of go out. Right. And, but so for a year, I, read briefs, I wrote memos, I did tons of legal research. And when I at the end of that year, when I reflected on that versus when I worked on transactional projects during those summer internships, I knew that, when I worked on the transactional projects, if I'm reading an agreement, I really time would kind of fly by. You just kind of get in the zone, and you just felt like, time was, you just didn't feel time. When I do legal research and writing, or when I did, I could feel every second. Like I just didn't, and it was something I could do, I just didn't want to do. And, and I knew that. And so once I went to the Porter Hedges, actually right after that, that's, the group I went into was kind of the corporate mergers and acquisitions group. So.
Very cool, man. Very cool. It sounds like you had a really cool mentor. Talk a little bit about your perspective on mentorship. Is that something you really sought out, or did you just kind of happen upon it? Do you seek out mentors in your life?
I can't say that I do, but I think it's like one of those things looking back, what I would think about it differently, because I do think it's important. And I do think that kind of seeking out is important. Because in that kind of a mentor relationship, like any relationship, is kind of a two-way street, right? And a lot of times it takes somebody to make, just to kind of take that first effort, and that seeking out a mentor, talking to someone, getting to know someone. That's part of it. And so when I look back, I wish I'd have done that more. For that job with the judge, it's kind of set up to be that, because you're working so closely with them. And so that's always been, I've always been very thankful for that, because I do consider her a mentor, and you can have mentors for like different aspects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Different aspects even within your professional career, different aspects for personal. And I've considered her a mentor for a little bit of both, actually, for kind of professional. When you start thinking about, sometimes things come up, right? And you're trying to think about what opportunity works best, how should I think about this, or things just change very drastically. And then, but also she's always been there as a personal mentor too, frankly. If when personal things come up, if you reach out, it's always, I've reached out to her, and she'll respond very quickly and get on the phone and talk to you. But I have developed where I work. I've developed mentors as well, or people I consider mentors, and in the same way, because I do think now when I work with people, I try to kind of keep that in mind. When I meet law students, I try to think about, gosh, what's something I wish someone told me, or something I lucked out and found out about or heard about, and I'd like to just pass that on, right? And I'll do that, or people I work with at the firm, I'll do that. And if they want to engage and continue and stay in touch, I'm always happy to do that and kind of be a sounding board sometimes for stuff.
I love that, Joe. I think people that are thinking that way are amazing, because I relate to your comment earlier that I wish I could go back and do it over again and seek it out more than I did. And, the fact that you're looking to help people and do those things. I actually, before starting GLE, I had all these ideas in my head, and one of them, like, I didn't really have it develop, but it was basically the things I wish I knew. And I had this like laundry list of like, man, I wish I understood this stuff when I was like 15 or 16 or 18 or whatever, and everyone always says they wish they could start sooner, right? That's the one common thing you always hear people say, business owners, what have you. And I don't want to miss either you talked about choosing mentors and kind of seeking out mentors. And I think it's something that I've realized recently is most people walk through life and they have accidental associations. You and me, I went to, we were at a networking event, right? So we took a step to go to a networking event where we could meet new people and connect, right? So that's in a way seeking it out. But, I think if you really want to learn something or want to do something, you need to find somebody who's doing what you want to do and really sync them out. And for some reason, it's not as common as I think it probably should be for people to approach it like that. They kind of just end up with whoever's around them. And I think of that as accidental association, right?
Yeah. That's a good way to think of it, is like, and it's hard. I think back, coming right out of law school and then getting started at the firm, you kind of don't know, it's hard to say what you want to do, right? But I think then at that point you're learning, and you just need to, learn as best as you can. And then as you figure out and, kind of get this knowledge, then you start, thinking, what direction do you want to go exactly that way? And then being, it's not being passive about it, right? And not being pushy either, but being, just taking that action and doing that. And I think about that too, because within our group at the firm, some of the lawyers, some of the partners do more securities regulations. Some of them do more, like me, do more mergers and acquisitions. Some do more financings and loan agreements. And as associates come in, I mean, you could work with anybody, but then the reality, and you're told, as you kind of get a sense of what you like to do or who you like to work with sometimes, but if you want to try something, seek that person out. If you want to do some securities offerings, seek out those, lawyers that do that and ask them. And you've got to, and be proactive about it. Ask them, I'd like to do that. I'd like to help on that next thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of what,
a very purposeful approach. Right. And, we met at that networking event. It was joining groups and networking and, associating in those types of environments, something that you've always done, or was that, did you have an epiphany one day and go, I'm going to start joining some things and maybe exploring other avenues?
Yeah, no, well, not something I always did. But it's probably now, maybe five or 6 years ago, started to think about, how can I, expand my network? How can I just meet, more new people, interesting people? And then I started to think about, look at the different, what am I interested in? What do I do? And then B, where do I want to spend my time? And so it was really about 5 years ago when I started thinking about that and, started doing, and this is a little over 5 years ago, I said, okay, I really like going to the rodeo. I'd like to learn more about it. I'll just volunteer. And so, I did that. And then another was, I'm under 40, still under 40, but I'm under 40. I work in, generally I work with a lot of, people in the energy industry. I'm going to go to, this group, and that's kind of energy focused. And that kind of thing. And so I did start to try to be more proactive about going to those groups and meeting people, and then, from there, following up with them, right? I mean, you can, and that's the thing, is you can meet people at these things, and, you might follow up with them, and half may not reply, or just might not, you might not meet them again, and then half you may meet multiple times and sure. Come to know.
My wife and I this year, and it's amazing, it ended up being COVID this year, the funkiest year I can remember. We sat down and made personal goals for the first time. I'm 31. It was New Year's Eve. We didn't have plans. We were going to stay in, just be lame. We poured some drinks and we sat down and we're like, let's make some goals for 2020. Let's, forget New Year's resolutions. Let's actually sit down and figure out like what we want to do this year and looking out 5 years. Right. And then when COVID came around, it was really an opportunity to take essentially spare time, we without commuting and things like that, we all got a little bit of time back. And, it was really just a decision, that purposeful decision of how can I be really deliberate and purposeful with spare time? Most people sit and binge watch some Netflix, which I'm definitely guilty of from time to time. But, it's just how can you take, one or two more steps to be a little more purposeful and deliberate with how you spend your spare time? And I think, that approach and that mindset is really, really invaluable at progressing, especially progressing rapidly, and not just letting accidental association take you wherever it may.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That is interesting. I mean, and that's important. And those goals can be anything from, big career goals to just kind of or discrete, things to accomplish, or also fun things. Learning something new. There is something to that. There's, and this was a while ago too. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I think I was feeling like I was just, you just go to work every day and then, watch TV. And I started following, one of the blogs I was following, it was called The Art of Manliness, which is a really neat blog.
I follow that one. Yeah,
and,
I'm familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's for men and women, right? But the whole point is, it has all kinds of different things. But one of the things I noticed that they were setting up was this kind of, I guess, a network or social media, and it's called The Strenuous Life. And you sign up for it, and you have to, you pay a one-time fee, and you're put into a group of, there's like, I'm gonna kind of, the details not accurate, but you're in a group of about 25 or 30, and then there's a number of other groups of 25 or 30 in like your cohort, and they only have signups at certain times. It's not just as you want.
Sure.
And so I saw that and I thought, I'm going to sign up for that. I'm curious about it. So I did. And the first thing you do is you have to, one is every week you have what they call the weekly AGON, AGON. And it's just a thing to do that week. And it might be, bear crawl for 50 yards outside, or it might be read a book, or it's kind of varied what you do, but it's just like, here's your goal for the week to do. But the other thing it has is, and my wife kind of called it, Boy Scouts for Men, but it had badges, and it was things like learn how to pick a lock, and there'd be information on there about how to do that. One was, it was kind of the astronomer badge, but it has different actions, and you track them online. It was like observe the moon every night for 30 days, and journal about it. And so it was kind of these little things to do, to accomplish, and then you get a little badge, and you do it. And if you do those weekly challenges for, I can't remember if it was 6 months straight, then you would get like a little coin kind of saying you did it, kind of thing. But it was nice. Every once in a while, I don't go on there as much now, but it's every once in a while I think about that, because I've picked up, some of the things I do now, just, I like to make cocktails as kind of a hobby.
That's a good hobby, man.
Doing that kind of, yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Not too frequently, but yeah. The nice thing about that is when you make it, if it's enough to just make one, you're like, okay, I'm not, too much trouble to make that second one.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
one is good.
Cool, man.
But
cool.
It was a neat thing.
Yeah. I have to commend you. One of the things that strikes me about you, and very few people do this, and so it kind of stands out when you do it. Well, I say very few people. I don't know many people that do this. But whenever we arrange time to hang out or whatever, you always follow up with me beforehand and make sure we're still on. And, you've always done a great job of following up. You're a great communicator. Your wife and you have a cool Christmas party that you throw for some friends, which I thought was cool. We didn't get to go because we had a conflict, but one of these years we'd love to go. But where did you learn that? Is that something you learned, or is that something that you just do naturally? Or, what really kind of like triggered your approach to following up with people, communicating, throwing events, things like that?
Yeah, that's, I appreciate that. One, that's a good question. I think my view, so actually, and I think the goal is to kind of be a good communicator. And one way to do that is I just try to think about how to make it easy for someone, right? And how to, and so if I make plans for someone or with someone to just meet them for lunch or whatever, and it's a friend or a business contact, I'll do a calendar item largely for my own benefit, but also I'll send it to them just so they have it on their calendar, and that's just, it's just intended to make it easy. And then, as the day's approaching, I know that stuff can come up. And so my thinking is, I'll reach out and make sure that it's still good and that's still on. And if something has come up, that's no problem. But it's just trying to keep that open and make it easy for someone. I try to think that way too, whenever, if I'm sending emails that are just conveying information, or if in work, right, the emails I send. And the way I think of it is like, if I if I get an email from someone and it's a novella of, a page, 2 pages of writing, that's hard to read, and it's really hard to get what is the message out of that. So when I send emails, I try to think about, how I'm structuring what I'm saying, try to organize it in an orderly way, use bullet points, a lot to just try to pull out that, important information and that kind of thing. But then on the Christmas party, we started doing that because we really liked, and we actually do it in combination with my mother-in-law and sisters-in-law. And what we did, we started doing it actually a while ago because we just wanted to do something fun for the holidays and bring together our groups of friends and just have a good time. And it's kind of grown over the years. We sadly, and we do plan to send out some sort of notice, but as you can imagine, we won't have it this year.
It's not going to be a Zoom meeting?
Yeah, really. We can send out cocktail kits to everybody. Yeah. But that's another one where it's a lot of fun to, I invite, friends and people I work with and kind of visit with them in that setting, and also visit with, it's funny, both my sisters-in-law and both my parents-in-law are all doctors. And so it's kind of a fun mix of, our various friends, people, in the medical industry, people in the practice law, people that are, business people. So it's kind of a fun mix in terms of, who all shows up.
Cool, man. A bunch of doctors and lawyers. I like it.
It is.
I like it, man.
And now, with my wife being the physical therapist, now we have a pretty strong contingent of physical therapists.
Oh, there you go. Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned email writing. That's something I've really embraced. I'm probably guilty and fail at maybe putting a little too much content in emails from time to time. But one of the things you triggered in my mind was when I don't know if you read the book 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. You ever heard of that book?
Mm-mm.
He talks about, and it's another way to, approach emails is, how do I reduce email traffic by my email? And so, a lot of people in emails will ask open-ended questions, or, they basically leave an option for an email chain. And one of the things he talks about is it's like, okay, how can I put conditional statements or conditional questions and answers in my emails so that I can avoid a back and forth over email? And something I see all the time is like, and maybe it's a lawyer thing because, you're trying to document everything, but a lot of times there's like conversations via email, like back and forth. And to me, like, it's way more effective to just pick up the phone, have a conversation. You can send one email and document it when you're done. But, I just see so much, like we get so much email. I don't know about you. I have like a bazillion email accounts I have to keep track of. Are you the same?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have like 6 or 8 or something ridiculous. But like the more we can reduce email traffic, from my perspective, the better. Start treating it more like a letter instead of email. And you're seeing good collaboration tools. Microsoft Teams, other things come out that are kind of helping with that, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's email is kind of, I think of, obviously, we see all kinds of like memes and stuff. And I saw one the other day, and it was, I went to 4 years of college to be a professional emailer, basically, right? But
yeah, right.
But emails are tough because they are kind of, they're a little bit more than the instant message or what you send on Teams, but they're not the full-on formal written, memo or letter or something. That's the thing is, if you are using email, you want to be kind of cognizant of what are you hoping to accomplish? What do you hope to get back? And, maybe it's a conversation, but that's hard especially if there's multiple people on there. But, maybe you're trying to either notify somebody of something, or you're trying to get an answer to something. And so that's where that would make a lot of sense to just lay out, like, what are the questions, but don't in a way that's conditional, not, just kind of leaving it wide open. Because what happens there, the other thing about it is, one thing I do try to do with email also is personalize it a little bit. Because the other thing is, if you are looking maybe for some input or a response, if you send an email, to a big group of people and it just says, dear all, blah, 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 like how many, I've yet to, no one will respond to that because it's so generic.
Right.
You send a blast email to the ether and everyone else is busy. And so, generic email not addressed to me is a real great way to, that's a quick filter. But, whenever I do things like that, I try to, I'm going to have, if you have a generic email, but then if there are people I really do want their feedback, I might send them a direct note, email, or forward it and say, such and such, addressed to them. What do you think? I'll just reach out, directly, right?
Sure,
and try to at least make it a little personal if that's what you want to accomplish.
That's a really good recommendation. I like that. And again, I'm probably guilty of failing when it comes to email. I think a lot of times we just get really busy, and sometimes we're just trying to move quick and be effective, and we'll just blast off an email. And it's important. I think your comments are right on. Like, take a little more time, structure it, be thoughtful, be direct with people. Personalize things, make it easy for them. I think that approach of just making it easy on other people is such a key thing for leaders to remember. Your job is to make it easy for your team to achieve their goals and be, really a facilitator of communication and efficiency increaser. Your job is to tear down barriers and, not in an uncollaborative way or in a, violent way, tearing them down necessarily, but just remove those and make it easy on people to be successful, right? Put them in a position to be successful.
Yeah.
Joe, what is your leadership approach? Do you, when you think about your career and some of the things you do and opportunities you may have had to lead, what are some of the things that are really important to you that you key in on? And maybe what are some of the things you see in some of the good leaders that you've had the opportunity to work with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think one thing I try to do and see, and I've seen in other people too, is, really try to just be authentic, right, about what you're doing and trying to accomplish. I think especially in what I do, right, in practicing law and working on transactions, it can lose a lot of the personal touch when you're just you revise the agreement and you send the comments back, and then you get them back and you talk about them with the client and then you send it back. But I mean, and it's important to kind of know the law, know what you're reading, know what you're practicing. But it's also important to kind of, once you know that, also know how can you be more of yourself in what you're doing, and then how and in how you interact with people. I do that both with my colleagues and who I'm working with, and also with people on my team when we're working on a project. And it's kind of a balance though, because but I mean, to me, when you're kind of when you're authentic about something, when you're trying to kind of have that personal touch, then you really can get you can get that much more, I think, out of people, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received was to just ask people how they want to be communicated with. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had someone do that to you?
Not had someone do that to me, but I did have someone, and it actually it made me more aware of that. And it was basically, I was working on the project with someone, and something came in, and instead of me just kind of answering it, right, I sent them a note and I said, hey, what do you think? Right? How should we respond? And he sent me his response, and which was very helpful. And then after the fact, when we talked about it, he was very thankful of me asking him that. And it was kind of because he'd worked on other projects where he'd never been asked what he thought or what, or for his input in that, in that way. And so and how to communicate. And so that really made me think, like, gosh, I should ask that more. You know?
Yeah. You have these moments, and I learned that in a training class, and I actually tried it with some folks, and it seemed to be really effective. You just, really ask them, like, okay, how do you want me to communicate you? And also, you got to teach people how to communicate with you. And many people don't do that. They'll sit and be frustrated or annoyed because someone's blasting them with a message when they'd rather they just call them, or they're sending them a bunch of emails when they'd rather get a chat, or a million different other things. But I've actually done that where I put sort of a from 1 to 5 priority of, hey, if you need me, do this, and if that doesn't work, do this, and if that doesn't work, do this, and the last option is send me an email, because I don't want more emails. And doing that, and then hearing from them, like, what, how do you want me, this is how I want to be communicated with, how do you want me to communicate with you? And it's funny how different the responses you get. What some people are like, hey, I want you to message me and ask me if I'm available before you call me on the phone. That was one I've gotten, and I actually hate that. I would much rather someone just pick up the phone and call me. But I understand they're being considerate, right? So it's all like you said, how do you make it easy on other people and be considerate of them, and just make it easy for them? And I just think that's such a good takeaway for leaders out there. We're ripe in our environment today for some mergers and acquisitions, I feel. And I know you probably can't share.
I hope so.
Well, I know, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities for changes in business and ownerships and structures, and lots going on in the world. Seems like a lot's changing. So just curious your overall perspective on it all. What's the environment looking like to you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it has been, I mean, the last 8-9 months has been very interesting. I had some transactions I was working on, going into COVID, and a couple of them, pushed through and closed, and people were wanting to get it done. And then a couple of them were kind of delayed and pushed off, and some are still delayed. Some got done in the middle of this. I think what has been interesting about this is it's so industry and business specific. And so there are certain industries and businesses that are very attractive for potential buyers in that business. And the hard thing is that, there's buyers that still want to put capital to work, and there's kind of fewer of these good targets. And those targets are kind of like, business services, software services, as well as things that are they could still work during all of this, but as well as any kind of selling online businesses, that kind of thing. The ones that are hurt, any tourism is hurt, retail's pretty hurt. And then, where our firm does a lot of work, and we have a lot of experience, is energy, and the energy industry's been hurt. When you think about the different areas of the energy industry, you've got, the upstream producers, they've been down, and not a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on, other than the huge corporate level deals that you hear about. But kind of your normal, what you think of acquisitions and divestitures of producing assets, that's been pretty depressed for a little while because of pricing. And then especially the initial part of the pandemic and shutdown, that's been very depressed, I would call it. And part of that is how those assets are valued has actually changed in the last number of years. It used to be, if you leased up a bunch of minerals and you drill a couple wells and prove it up, and so you've proved up these reserves, you've caused them to be, proved undeveloped reserves from when they were more speculative, then you've created value, and someone will come along and buy that. And you could take on debt to get that done, but you were going to basically flip these. And it was very much about the value of the reserves. 3 years ago, around how those are valued has changed. It's not about value of reserves anymore. It's about cash flow. Are you profitable? Are you generating more cash than you're using to drill and operate wells? And that's a very different at that point. And so they've been, private companies have kind of struggled through all of that. And what we've seen in the pandemic is it's really kind of rippled through in terms of midstream companies have struggled, downstream surprisingly have struggled because of the depressed demand for gasoline and mainly the depressed demand for jet fuel. And then where I do a good amount of work is in what I call energy services. So it's kind of everything else, the people that make valves, the people that truck and ship the products, the people that are working around the wellhead. Those companies are their margins have been really minimized because of the pressures from leading up to this, and now they're kind of getting hit as well. So, but there is some consolidation. I think it's just hard on that side of it. Is people always like to have a deal, but it's kind of at what point will our sellers willing to take the low price? But I mean, definitely you are seeing, like I said, in some industries, people going back out and acquiring and investing in companies. So it'll be, as we go into 2021, and I don't know if things will normalize, but as we just have more of this, and so you kind of just factor it in.
Who knows what it's going to be, man?
Yeah.
Good grief. What a year. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Interesting to see for sure. Going back to that cash flow versus the value of a reserve, help an ignoramus like me understand why that value perspective changed.
It's hard. It's hard, and there's probably been a lot written out there, so it's kind of hard to say. I guess it's hard to say why, but it ultimately, what would happen. I mean, a lot of times companies, what they would do is they would raise capital or borrow money and be able to either acquire these assets and also drill and kind of prove them up. And so because it's the thing about producing oil and gas is it's very capital intensive, right? And so they were able to go do that, and they were able to go get more capital to do that some more. And it was, again, kind of building up the reserves that they have. And then they would do that in companies, they would develop, people in the companies would develop their views and theories on, this play or that play, or, and so kind of where you build up these positions is very, there's a little bit of art in that science, right? And
right.
And so they do that knowing that there's larger companies will come and want to buy that from them. Ultimately, the large, Chevrons of the world will want to come and buy these assets and then put them to work. And at that level, those companies do generate cash flow. They've got so many assets, they're producing so much, and they're in so many different areas of the energy industry. I mean, they are doing cash flow. But when you've got just the pure upstream producer operator, that it was kind of a little bit different prospect. And it was just such a fundamental way of valuing businesses, including public, companies when they were, just producers, right? A public company that's just producing upstream oil and gas. The biggest thing you'd look at was the reserve report, and how much reserves they've got there and the value of the reserves. Now it's net income, right? It's the profit. And so I guess the shift was just prices stayed depressed long enough that people weren't having the success at kind of
right
reselling, right, improving up reserves and selling them. You just didn't see the success there anymore. And as that kind of trickles out, and then you just investors, the public investors, their view of that, their willingness to put more money towards that slows down. And then that kind of trickles down to the private companies, because their ability to raise the capital to do that, since that's the end goal, is to sell that company there that, raising public money, their ability to do that, really reduces.
Yeah. Interesting. Joe, this has been fun, man. One question I've been asking my guests recently after I started this podcast, and as I've been doing it, I've also gotten the perspective of, hey, who knows who could see this multiple generations from now. And I think about, how cool it would be if my great great grandpa was sitting there talking with, my buddies, maybe our great great grandkids will be buddies, and they'll be sitting there and looking at Joe and Phil talking one day, grandpa, great 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 grandpa Joe and Phil. What would I want them to hear? What would I want to leave them with? And so the question I pose is, if you only had one to three things to leave with those generations to come, what would they be?
It would be to really remember the importance or the value of human connection, right? And that's what I think. It's something I think, again, think about like what I wish I knew a little earlier. And it's kind of you getting out in what you do, making connections, learning, meeting people, learning about what they do, thinking about how you can help them, asking for help when you need it. But that is just so valuable, even at, the lowest level, but all the way up, as you work your way up, kind of knowing, meeting people, getting to know them, and then knowing you can rely on them and reach out to them. It's that human connection, even early on, and it's not a networking thing. It's just a human thing. And to me, and so that's something that even, if someone's in high school and they, get to know the managers at the, maybe not the movie theater, but wherever they work, right?
Right.
Or as you're in college, get to know the people that you're in class with, get to know your professors, and then stay in touch with them. You got, kind of make that connection and maintain it. That would be something to really kind of keep in mind.
I love that, Joe. That's something that I neglected. And I'll be honest, I neglected that for the last, 5-10 years. And just in the last few years, I've started to go, you know what? I took those for granted. I took those good relationships I had from my high school, my college, and other days, and just, I took them for granted. And I've been reconnected with some of those folks recently. It's, via COVID, we're having all these video conferences and things. And, for some reason we had the technology before and FaceTime and things, but for whatever reason, it just didn't take advantage of those types of things. So I think that's a great, important takeaway. And the networking your motivation matters. And that comment that it's not networking, it's just human, it's the why behind it. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for selfish reasons, or are you doing it to, help out your neighbor and, just be a friend, be a human to them. And, that's how you're going to meet people that are going to connect with you and do the same thing for you. Right. It's not networking for your benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right.
So when's the next symphony, man? You going to the symphony anytime soon?
So it's actually been really interesting what they're doing. We've started, the symphony has been doing live stream symphony every Saturday night. And they've got, the members of the symphony there are socially distanced up on stage. So it's actually a smaller symphony than what they would usually have, which kind of affects the repertoire that they can choose from, essentially. And then they do have live. So we went maybe 3 weeks ago. We went, and there was it actually was a very interesting experience. There was only maybe 150 people in there, and it was the Saturday night event, the one they were live streaming, and your ticket has a 15-minute arrival time. So, and I say this, they're doing everything they can, because this is what they do, right? They perform for groups, but your ticket has an arrival window and a 15-minute window, and you can't go in until your window. And so you park in the normal place, you go in, you can only go in through one door, and they check your arrival time as you kind of go there. And then when you go in, the person who scans your ticket's behind a big plastic thing. So they scan it, through the plastic, and then you go around, and they have one of these deals that can, sense your temperature. from far away. So it's not like someone's in your face taking your temperature. It's just you kind of slowly approach this, laptop that has like this big,
it's
radar
weird, right?
thing over the
They
top
had
of
one
it.
of those at the hospital when we had our baby.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
and like you kind of stand there, and they'll give you a thumbs up, and then you go around and you go to your seat, and where you sat, it was, I mean, we weren't within 15 feet of another person, and so it was very weird to be kind of in the, in Jones Hall, and there's like, it actually felt it was kind of, you felt like it was kind of you're just there, and then because you don't see anybody for 15 seats this way and that way. They also removed a lot of seats to create aisles so that, if you're kind of in the middle, there's additional aisles going up and down, and then there's a lot of additional aisles side to side, so you can kind of go through these extra aisles to get to your seat. So you sit there, you have to wear the mask the whole time, and they had a nice message, the intro message kind of pre-recorded is basically, the ushers will be watching to make sure everyone has their masks on. If you have a second warning, then we'll ask you to leave. And then they had, if you have a problem wearing a mask and it's not comfortable or you can't do it, please see one of the ushers, and they will talk to you in the lobby about, your options to enjoy the symphony at home, basically. Because for them to have the symphony to put it on, I mean, there's no exceptions. Everyone has to have the mask on, and they take it really serious because they're just so thankful to be able to perform, even in this very limited capacity. But it's been great.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Joe and his wife are donors at the Houston Symphony. Going back to your Christmas party, my family started a similar Christmas tradition, less people, but we started getting a limousine every Christmas. We'd all pitch in and take some close friends down to the symphony and listen to Handel's Messiah. That was our Christmas tradition for the last several years. We've kind of gotten away from it a little bit, but obviously this year I don't think we're going to do it. But always love the symphony. We've had an opportunity to go together, and I think it's pretty cool that y'all donate to that. And I'm from a musical family, so we have a passion for good music.
Yeah. No, we've really enjoyed it. I mean, I think we kind of eased into it. I would say, we started by going to the Pop Symphony, holiday special, and it just happened to be the first one we went to, and it was a really awesome production. It involved, the second half of it was the whole original, Grinch soundtrack, including the narrator, the deep, baritone voice, was somebody from the opera, and he was up there singing, "You're a Mean One." It was really so fun. Yeah, it was so fun. And so we went again the next year, and then after that second time, we thought, we kind of like the pops, where we don't have as much of the background to really appreciate the classical music, and so we got kind of a partial season to go to the Pops Symphony and went to all those, and they started doing these movies with live symphony soundtrack, which are, when they can do them again, are so fun. I mean, when you see Jurassic Park with the whole symphony playing a perfectly in sync soundtrack to the movie that's up on the screen, at the front of Jones Hall, it's really fun. It's pretty powerful, and so we've done that a number of times. But after that, we thought, we really like this. We've had season tickets a couple of years, and then I found the donor group there, and we've continued to really enjoy it and support them however we can.
That's so.
But definitely check out. So the live stream, Saturday nights, 8:00. It's like $20, and you get a YouTube link, and you can sit in your pajamas and make dinner, and have the live symphony playing in your living room. It's kind of, I mean, I kind of hope it's one of those things from the pandemic. I hope they continue to do, just because it's such a fun way to bring the symphony to a lot more people.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Very cool. To your point about the soundtracks, in high school, I had the opportunity, my high school choir, to play with the Detroit Symphony, and we'll sing, I guess, with the Detroit Symphony. And they did Final Fantasy, and they did sort of the video game Final Fantasy with the Final Fantasy soundtrack. So we were singing behind the symphony with the French horns blasting away, and oh man, the sound that those professional musicians produce is incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. But very cool, Joe. Appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. If people want to find you and learn more about what you're doing at Porter Hedges, where can they find you?
I'm definitely on the website, www.porterhedges, which is PorterHedges.com. Also on LinkedIn, I'm on there as well, and I'm always happy to connect.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you, Joe. Thanks for sharing today. It's great catching up, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Paul.